Greetings to my fellow peace blunderers and welcome to my brand new opening theory series starting with the Scandinavian defense. I chose the Scandinavian as the first opening to cover because it's a really good defense for beginners to learn. It's easy to pick up, it's not too theoretically dense, and the plans in it are always more or less obvious. Today we're looking at the main line with Queen to A5, but rest assured all the other variations will be covered in the upcoming videos, of which there will be quite a few. In my videos I'll be using the latest theory combined with my personal findings as well as the power of Stockfish 15 to back my analysis up. And although we're looking at things from Black's perspective, I'll be offering a balanced view and providing the best moves and ideas for both sides. So this video should be useful not only for learning how to play the Scandinavian, but also how to play against the Scandinavian. I'm also aware that a lot of opening videos on the internet are sometimes a bit difficult to understand, especially for beginners, because starting move 3, a lot of them just start playing weird stuff, and my 15 move analysis is completely irrelevant. So to cater for players of all skill levels, I'll be combining deep mainline analysis with a lot of sidelines and a way to punish them within reasonable limits, of course. Hence a little disclaimer, I cannot physically cover every single move that can happen on a board, but feel free to leave a question in the comments regarding those and I'll be happy to help. Notable oddities, mistakes and inaccuracies will be placed separately towards the end of the video. If you just so happen to find this video useful, please like and subscribe. I'll be bombarding you with more and more opening theory till cows come home. And one last thing, when learning any opening, don't focus so much on the moves themselves, but on the general ideas and principles. And let's go! The Scandinavian defense acts as a response to E4 on move 1 and starts with D5. And this is arguably the Scandinavian's main strength. It's very provocative, directly and immediately attacks the white center, does not allow white to do what he wants to do, and forces white to play your game. Usually on move 2, white would really like to play knight to f3 or d4, but he cannot do that because he's having to address the problem with the e-pawn. If he played knight to f3 or d4, he would obviously lose the pawn. Although admittedly d4 would transpose into the black Madima gambit, which is a very dangerous opening on its own, and it's not a subject of this video. Today we're looking strictly at by far the most popular response of takes. We recapture with queen takes d5, and this is where the Scandi critics come in. Oh, you see, it's not nice to centralize your queen so early, or you could get harassed, or you should develop your knights and bishops before your queen, and all of this is true. But in chess, just like in life, exception proves the rule. Don't ever be bullied by someone not to play the Scandinavian. It's an opening that is played on virtually all levels. And no, you won't really see this at Super GM tournaments, but since when did you become a Super GM? And if you did, what are you doing watching this video? Anyway, now the most natural move for white would be knight to c3, developing a piece and harassing the queen at the same time. My strong personal recommendation, the main line, and coincidentally the move we're looking at today, is queen to a5. Now d4 claiming the center and temporarily pinning the c3 knight to the king. Knight f6 by black, natural piece development, knight f3 also natural piece development, and bishop to f5. The reason we are moving our light squared bishop now is that we really want to castle, but that would involve e6, which would otherwise lock the bishop in. But now that we moved it out, it'll feel much better. And this is where the theory splits into 4 big blocks that you can see on the right side of your screen. The next move for white will basically define the character of the game. The most popular is the natural bishop to c4. Very good square for the bishop in many e4 positions, no wonder white wants it there. And this is where I want to make my first strong point. In many Scandinavian lines, and not necessarily now, maybe even a couple of moves later, a lot of players advocate for playing c6, arguing that it helps stop d5 and provides the queen with a good escape route to c7 or d8. Now, in my unprofessional opinion, c6 should be played only if really forced. With the pawn staying on c7, our knight can now jump onto c6 instead of d7, which is often good. If we choose to castle long, our pawn structure will be less compromised. Our queen will still feel very safe on b6 if it needs to retreat, and how to stop d5 without c6 I will later show you. So let's forget about c6 for a second and focus on the stronger and more preferable for me personally, e6. And now we arrive at a point where we see how much white is actually prepared to fight the Scandinavian. The most challenging move for black here is bishop to d2 staring at the queen. Bishop b4 developing, pressuring the knight and reinforcing the queen. a3 challenging the bishop, takes, attacking the queen, and the queen retreats to b6. And now white has three principal continuations. The most popular, direct, but only second best is d5. And you can see why it's appealing. White wants to exploit the fact that black is slightly underdeveloped and attacks a lot of things at the same time, namely knight on f6 and a pawn on e6. However, just a little carefulness and caution for black will lead us to a position where white is only marginally better. E takes d5, bishop takes d5, and now that the black king is feeling less and less safer in the center, it's high time we castled. However, we will have to concede our kingside integrity after bishop takes f6, g takes f6. And if you are curious as to why after bishop to f6 we didn't recapture with the queen, the answer is really simple. b7 is no longer protected, so bishop takes b7 is possible, with the a-rook also getting captured in the process. So we'll have to stick with a compromised pawn structure, but trust me, it's not as bad as it looks. Now castles, knight to d7 developing and maybe going to e5 at some point later on. Queen to d2, preparing to hit the king side, but as I said, it's not as vulnerable as it looks because after bishop to g6, we see that everything is quite solid. Queen to f4, centralizing and putting pressure on f6, and now rook a to d8, also developing and centralizing, will conclude our analysis for this line. With equal material, white stands slightly better here with 0.5, most likely looking to target black's vulnerable king and pawn structure. At the same time, black is most likely looking to do some serious damage on a less guarded queen side. Coming to a second move 10 option for white, let's look at the second most popular but my personal least favorite, castles. The reason for that is that in many Scandinavian positions, not in all but in many, whenever you see white castling kingside and doing so relatively early, as black, you should be breathing a sigh of relief. As white, your best chances against the Scandinavian usually come from rapid queenside castling, d5, and kingside pawn pushes, as I'm about to show you in later lines. You must not let them calmly finish development and castle, otherwise your advantage goes away. Because then, black is looking to exchange his defensive-minded, less active pieces for your attacking, more active pieces, equalize the game, and then edge you in the endgame. So coming back to this line, black should now play knight to c6, courtesy of us not playing c6 earlier, rook to e1 developing, black calmly castles, and now moves like b4 looking for queenside expansion, and rook f to d8 developing will conclude our analysis on this line. White hardly looks better here with just 0.3, as we are most likely looking at a queenside minded game. Also let me point out that because our light squared bishop always ends up on f5 in all of our lines, whenever you face knight to h4 you typically should be glad to see it. With this move, white will have most likely already lost his advantage. Any of the three moves, bishop to g6, bishop to g4 and bishop to e4, can be possible, you just need to look at the exact position and decide which one is better. And another quick note in this variation, if after castles knight to c6 we still see d5, black will already be winning. And this is why d5 by white should be played on move 10, not on move 11, it's just too late. Black wins after castling queenside, pitting the pawn, and white is bound to lose material. The best try is bishop takes knight, relieving some central pressure, pawn takes bishop, queen to c1 getting out of the pin, and now we grab a free pawn with tempo, e takes d. Bishop gets away attacking our bishop, bishop to d3, and now not exchanging it but placing it on e4, and we have an extra pawn, our king is perfectly safe, and we can use the open g file to attack white's kingside. Black enjoys a nice advantage of -1.8. And now, let's look at the last move 10 alternative for white, which is quite rarely played, but definitely the best, queen to e2. This move represents one of the strongest approaches against the Scandinavian, which I've mentioned before. Black must immediately castle, which is followed by queenside castling for white as well. We have to keep up with the pace of the game, so knight to c6 developing, and now witness the second key part of white's plan in the setup, rook h to g1. White is looking to exploit the fact that the black's queen is slightly astray on the queen side and will now try to go for the throat on a king side. One of the best responses for black is knight to e4, and although we're moving forward, ultimately this is a defensive move. We're looking to exchange as many pieces as possible, otherwise our head will get blown clean off. g4 marching forward and attacking the bishop, but before retreating, an intermezzo move with knight takes c3, pawn takes, and now bishop retreats to g6. Black is solid and can over time figure out what to do with white's compromised pawn structure, but will be most likely having to defend precisely for the next couple of moves as white is enjoying more piece activity, great initiative, and objective advantage of 0.7. And to finish off with bishop to c4 on move 6, just to remind you that after e6 we've only looked at bishop to d2 on move 7. This is the main and the best move, however, a lot of players for white don't really prepare for the Scandinavian a lot of the time, so they play on autopilot. And that autopilot usually means develop your pieces and castle as quickly as possible. So don't be surprised if a lot of the time instead of bishop d2, you will see castles kingside. And as I said before, if white chooses to castle kingside quite early in the game, as black, we should be happy to see it. It gives us time to finish development, and by this point, we will have already equalized or about to equalize with relative ease. For example, bishop to b4 usually transposes into a very comfortable line that we've already analyzed when white castles kingside on move 10. We normally see bishop d2, castles, a3, takes, queen to b6, and we've seen this position before. Now let's look at the second move 6 option for white, the immediate bishop to d2. Remember that we've seen this move before, but it was played not on move 6, but on move 7 after bishop to c4. And honestly, a lot of the time we will transpose to bishop to c4 on move 6 variation after e6, bishop to c4. And now we would play the usual bishop b4, a3, takes, queen b6, you know the drill. Also, any lightning fast attempts at castling queenside for white shouldn't really bother you either. After queen e2, knight c6, castles, and black is very comfortable here, enjoying a nice edge of minus 0.5. So bishop d2 on move 6 either transposes into something we've looked at already or creates a non-threatening position. Unless, here, on move 7, white plays one of the most venomous maneuvers against the Scandinavian, and you white players should write that down, His Majesty, knight to e5. Knight to e5 can even be played as early as move 6, we will take a look at that later down the line, but when it is played, extra special care is needed. First, knight to e5 should almost automatically scream in your head, c6. I know I've been harsh on c6 in this video, but knight to e5 usually means that it wants to go to c4, and as you can tell, from c4, the knight will not only attack our queen on a5, but also will be covering our usual retreat square on b6, hence c6 is really needed. Second, you should be prepared to defend vigorously and precisely. So let's see how we do it. A very important queen to b6, temporarily disabling knight to c4. That is because if knight to c4 was to be played now, we can simply capture on d4. And now, Scandinavian players, you better listen. In this position, the only move for white that gives him an advantage, the rest simply either equalize or give black an advantage, is queen to f3. It leaves a total of 3 white pawns hanging, but it is black who needs to be very careful. Don't take any of those and simply prevent all the threats coming from the white queen along the h1, a8 diagonal with c6. The aggression continues with queenside castling. And now, the only move to stay in the game, for black this time, is knight b to d7. If you play anything lazy like bishop to e7 preparing to casually castle, you'll be shocked to know what kind of numbers the engine is showing. Because here comes the plan that we've already seen before, and we will see it again. Queenside castling, and what else? Correct. g4. Bishop g6 trying to escape, but it's too late. h4. And really, there aren't any good moves. If you try moving your h-pawn to create space for your bishop, simply knight takes, pawn takes, g5, and your position is completely busted, +7 for white. And if you think that grabbing a pawn with your queen is a good idea in this position, it will enter a world of immeasurable pain where it will be endlessly tortured by all tools known to man until it eventually succumbs to its deep wounds. So going back, please knight b to d7, okay? But why? Quite simply, we develop a piece and challenge the extremely annoying e5 knight that we will capture when the time is right. Bishop d3 developing, and we would really like to exchange pieces in this fiery situation, so bishop takes, queen takes. Now please remember that as much as we'd like to capture that e5 knight, we must not rush it. Capturing it now will result in a pawn on e5, dislodging our knight, and as nice as it looks on d5, we'd rather have it on f6 defending our kingside. Also, the e5 pawn controlling f6 and d6 is arguably even more annoying than the e5 knight. That's why, usually, the knight should be captured when it presents an immediate threat, not a lingering annoyance. Instead, a humble rook to d8 developing, queen to g3 looking at g7 so the dark squared bishop cannot move just yet, queen takes d4 grabbing the pawn and double attacking the e5 knight, takes, rook e1 completing development, and this is where we're going to stop. Yes, for now, white is a pawn down, but his king is very safe, and all of his pieces are nice and centralized. Black will have to be very careful when untangling himself, which will most likely result in losing the extra pawn, if not even more. White has an advantage of 0.8. Congratulations, we're done with 2 move 6 replies, 2 to go. The next one in question is bishop to d3, and really this is the one that you should be happy to see. It normally doesn't presuppose any aggressive play and will allow you to normally develop, castle and play solid. Now the usual e6, the same thing we've done against any bishop move so far, and usually here white castles kingside, which is good to see because that means we will have a balanced equal position and we get to play normal chess. And as much as I have stressed so far that we are interested in exchanging pieces, because the position is so calm, we may as well let white do it himself if he so wishes. So don't take on d3 allowing him to develop his queen automatically, just play bishop to e7 preparing to castle. If he does capture on f5, remember that we have a queen on a5 so we can recapture with a queen. This position is now very close to all zeros, so castle, play knight to c6 and just play normal chess. It's slightly more challenging for us if he decides not to capture and continue developing with bishop to f4. Here I would recommend c6 so that the pawn isn't hanging should the queen move away. Rook to e1 developing and centralizing, knight b to d7 also developing, and honestly, as much as it's a cop-out answer, I don't have much to say about this position, it's just calm equal chess. Further possible moves are countless and may include something like h3, making space for the f4 bishop. We can have an exchange on d3 now because our queen doesn't want to be stuck defending the f5 bishop all game, and after the exchange, simply castle, and this is where I'd like to stop. The position is perfectly balanced, and white has an almost non-existing edge with 0.2. And last but not least, let's have a look at what I think is the best move 6 for white in this position, and I've sung songs about it before. Knight to e5. Again, knight to e5 should scream c6, so we play c6. And I'd also like to note that queen to b6 that we played in a similar position before doesn't work here. We must play c6 immediately. In the position that we saw, queen b6 worked because it was targeting the hanging pawn on d4, hence preventing the knight to c4. In our position, however, the d4 pawn isn't hanging because it's defended by the queen. So knight to c4 is possible and very annoying. The best move is actually queen to e6 check, knight to e5 blocking, and white is already much better, mainly because of the awkward queen on e6. So yet again, knight to e5 on move 6, we reply with c6. After c6, knight to c4 doesn't carry that much weight, so it's much better to just develop naturally with bishop to c4. If you do see knight to c4 here on move 7, just retreat your queen to d8, and congratulations, the position will already be equal. Now comes our customary e6, and now yet again, we'll get to witness the power of knight on e5. When the knight is on e5, expect the good old kingside blasting with g4, and when the bishop retreats, h4. Now, how do we reply to knight on e5? You guessed it, knight b to d7. Now in this position, as opposed to some other knight e5 positions, the knight is attacked twice and defended once. And now, players for both sides, please remember that the only move that retains the advantage for white is taking. The knight has already done its job facilitating g4 and h4, so holding on to it is not a good idea. You should focus on developing your other pieces. And capturing the bishop here isn't well thought of because after h takes g, we provide black with counterplay down the king side. So again, we take and retakes with the knight. And yet again, the only move to press the advantage here for white and is very logical is h5. Luckily, our bishop has an escape via e4 because the c3 knight is pinned. And now the best move for white is actually castle, getting rid of the pin and attacking the bishop. Bishop retreats, exchanges follow. Bishop g3 going back, bishop d6 developing will conclude our analysis. Black can choose to castle either way, and white will attack accordingly either with his advanced kingside pawns or with his queenside majority. The space advantage, the bishop pair, and the slightly awkward black's queen are providing white with a comfortable edge. 0.8 according to the engine, the highest of all the main lines we've looked at. Okay guys, now as far as Queen A5 mainline theory is concerned, we are done. Now let's look at some weird stuff that happens mostly in blitz games or at beginner to intermediate level. If white plays knight to f3 on move 4, don't worry, proceed as per usual with knight to f6. Chances are you guys will transpose to the mainline theory after d4, bishop to f5. I've also seen some folks preemptively insert h3 to stop bishop g4. Please remember that in a Scandinavian the bishop belongs on f5, not on g4. So our opponent just prevented something we didn't want to do in the first place, hence conceding a bit of his advantage. Just play the usual bishop to f5, most likely followed by e6, bishop b4 and castles kingside. Also on bishop to g4, and this is more for white players, know that this is a slight mistake and you are already close to winning. The way to punish it is the natural h3. If now takes, queen takes, we are threatening a massacre along the h1a8 diagonal, so c6 is more or less forced, and now castle queenside via bishop to d2, knight b to d7 and castles, and have a very comfortable game. If after h3 bishop retreats, we push it further with g4, bishop g6 and now knight to d2 is a very handy multi-purpose move. It allows our queen to defend g4 as we're pushing the h-pawn and prepares the knight to jump to c4 to attack the queen. Now something like e6, h4, h6 creating space for the bishop, knight to c4 attacking the queen, queen b4, a3 attacking the queen again, queen e7, and again, white is already much better. If on move 6 we have bishop b2, be ready for a calm, comfortable and equal game. The usual setup will follow. e6, castles, bishop b4, bishop d2, castles, a3 takes, queen b6, we've seen it. If we play against someone who just likes harassing our queen for no reason and plays a3 with the plan of b4, we calmly play c6 preparing the retreat, b4, queen c7, and the game is already perfectly equal. Something like bishop c4, e6, castles, bishop d6, rook e1, castles will give us another equal, calm, fair game. And I guess that will be it, my favorite unintentional gambiteers. Please let me know in the comments if you like the videos of such format. Also let me know what moves don't let you sleep at night amongst those I haven't mentioned. And don't forget to like and subscribe, it helps me out massively. May all your moves on the board be exclam moves and have an excellent day. Love you guys, see you in the next one.